Welcome back, Stephen with Magic Meta Money, filming from the great, beautiful state of Montana today, my brother-in-law's office. We're on vacation, but still wanted to get a video out because I am really excited about the Dungeons & Dragons set, Adventures of the Forgotten Realm. So for the preview season, we're going to do something a little different this time. Instead of just talking about random cards, we're going to go in order. We're going to start off with class cards, and then of course we'll move on to dungeon cards, and then dragon cards as well. So if you want those videos to conveniently pop up in your YouTube homepage, just hit subscribe and join the Wolf Pack. These class cards are really cool just from a concept perspective. Flavor-wise, it's great to dive into a class like you're playing D&D, but also mechanic-wise, I think it's a really cool concept. They remind me of Planeswalker cards brought to us back in Lorwyn, and also like Saga cards brought to us in Dominaria, but they're different. They're a little not one or the other, kind of a combination of both. Unlike Planeswalkers cards, you don't get value every single turn for free. You have to invest mana to get more value. But overall, they're also harder to interact with, so it's more likely your class is going to stay on the battlefield than your Planeswalker is going to stay on the battlefield overall, with the mechanics of the game, with being able to do damage and attack, and cards that say destroy target creature or Planeswalker. There's just less enchantment hate going around in the game. That's a fair general rule of thumb. Not always the true, of course. If someone wants to pack the heat, they can. But in general, these are going to be harder to deal with than Planeswalkers. So you have to invest mana since they're kind of safer investments up front in order to get your value as you go on. I really like that. They're also different from sagas in the fact that when you top deck a saga, you get value. First, you only invest mana the first turn, but then you have to wait time to get your value. But if you top deck a class, you can just dump all of your mana into it and go level 1, level 2, level 3, all in the same turn and not have to wait over time. So I think these cards are really cool, a nice new subclass of card and a new mechanic that feels different and feels pretty powerful. Let's start off with the Warlock class. This one's great as it's just 1 mana to invest up front, and starting off, you're not getting something incredibly powerful. This is very deck specific. This is not a generically powerful card. This looks like a card that's very specific that goes in some type of Aristocrats deck, something where you can trigger this and have people take extra damage on your end step because you are sacrificing creatures or having creatures that, maybe they enter the battlefield, like evoke creatures, things like that, and then die immediately. So there's some value in that first chapter, not a ton, but it's only 1 mana. And then what's nice is this card cantrips for 2 additional mana. And so paying 3 mana for a strategic planning is not great, but you can do it over 2 different turns if needed. So when you have a spare mana, you throw it down on chapter 1. And then on your next turn, when you have the 2 mana, you can make it cantrip and be able to throw some stuff in your graveyard, again, with those graveyard synergies. This is very synergistic of just black generic things with graveyard and death and things dying and dying triggers. So I think this looks powerful. And then chapter 3, or level 3, I don't think it's going to come up very often, but if you just want to end the game, chapter 7, or 7 mana, level 3, throw in all your creatures, get some damage in, some of your creatures die, and then you can stack the triggers on your end step to make sure that they lose the life first, and then it's going to total up all the damage you got in, the life loss, and then double it all, so you can just end the game if you ever have 7 mana lying around and you get to that point. Overall, in the right deck, looking at just levels 1 and 2, kind of ignoring level 3, I still see this as being constructed playable with the right deck. Cleric class, very appropriately named by everything about life gain, and that extra bonus of 1 extra life when you would gain life can definitely make a big difference. And then the chapter 2, the level 2 ability is really powerful. We've seen that built in different cards that have seen constructed play for years. This is very expensive. It's 5 total mana to get this to happen. So that worries me. I think that's a lot of mana to have to get this effect. But again, it's on an enchantment that's hard to deal with, hard to interact with. But it just kind of seems like if you want this effect in standard, just play Heliod. Like, that just seems better to me. I don't think this one's going to make it. This one that does entice me to see if it's possible to make it is level 3. For 5 mana, being able to resurrect any creature and bring anything back from the graveyard, that is really powerful. And maybe that tips it over the edge if you're putting some power stuff in the graveyard. Like maybe the Cleric and the Warlock class go together. They go on the same deck, a black-white Aristocrats deck. That's possible. But overall, this one seems a bit expensive to see constructed play, in my opinion. This one doesn't really impress me. Doesn't look super powerful. 1 mana just to change your dice rolling. You're going to have a lot of dice rolling effects in the game. I mean, it is great to be able to increase your dice rolling, and I know that's part of the game, right? I haven't played D&D since I was a kid, so I don't remember all the rules, but I remember like there being things where it's like, hey, roll 6 die sixes or whatever, and then take your top 3 scores or whatever it is. So I remember that being a thing. So it's cool they introduced that into the game, but you're gonna need a lot of dice rolling for this one to really be worth it, because again, Chapter 2, Level 2 also has to deal with dice rolling. And then Level 3, giving them all haste. That's really powerful, but overall you have to invest 6 mana to get there to give all your creatures haste. So even though that's broken up over different turns, way too much mana for that type of an effect. But if you're doing a lot of dice rolling, then this could be cool. Now the Bard class looks really powerful in the right deck. Naturally, this makes me think of Commander, because then you're going to have at least one legendary creature every game. But if you're playing some type of legendary creature card deck with a bunch of legends, this seems like more like a kitchen table type card, making cards with legends. There's a lot of cards over the years that have specialized with legendary creatures and legendary spells, and none of them have really made a major splash in Constructed. Again, I don't really know about Commander, that's a little different, but with your main Constructed levels. But this seems like a really cool card and really powerful. The fact that it gives you mana back and you can instantly just recoup all the mana you spent on this card by casting more legendary creatures, really, really powerful. And then in the late game, it just becomes a major card draw machine and card advantage engine. This looks awesome. Don't know about Constructed playable just because of the deck building requirements. The cost on this card is really powerful, but the fact that everything has to do with legendary creatures makes it seem like more of a kitchen table casual deck, but a really fun deck to build. Wizard class, a really fun card that really caught my eye because 4 mana for a sorcery speed inspiration, not going to cut it in Constructed. You got to be scrying 2 and doing that at instant speed for that to really be powerful. But the fact that you do this over, again, it's not all 4 mana all at once. When you have a spare mana, you throw this thing onto the battlefield, and then later at will, you have a Divination just ready for you to go. Divination has seen plenty of Constructed play, but then you also have the level 3 ability, which is saying, hey, when I want to end the game and finally turn the corner as a control deck and say, hey, I now have my creatures that are attacking and my 1 evasive threat or whatever it is, I'm going to end the game quicker and quicker because I'm going to draw these cards and all of it's going to do more damage to your face by pumping up my creatures. So I absolutely could see this with some Constructed play. Not as like a 4 of automatic, but it could see some play. Fighter class looks great as a level 1 tutor and equipment, and then level 2 you start to get some mana advantage again. You invest 3 mana and then you get cost reduction 2 at a time. So instantly, after 2 equips, you've already saved yourself a mana. And this is pretty sweet. I think this one's strong in the right equipment deck. Again, is there a Constructed deck for that? I'm not so sure, but this does look like a Stone Blade-esque type effect that could be a lot of fun. Rogue class. This one really caught my eye at being a crazy powerful late game card. Really something I don't see being a Constructed mainstay in your main board, but looks like a sideboard powerhouse. When you're just going to a grindy matchup and you have some flyers, you have like a rogue deck. I mean, there is a rogue deck in Standard, right? It's really, really powerful. But if you have this deck and then from the sideboard, it's going to go to a grind, this is going to go to, hey, turn 8, 9, 10, and you're still going to be playing. And now you can cast all of these cards once you get to Chapter 3, Level 3, and be able to just have this huge stockpile of cards. That looks really, really strong. I don't think you should mainboard this card unless you have an interesting metagame, but it looks like a really sweet weapon to bring from the sideboard. I could see this making a splash. Sorcerer class, again, one that strikes me as a little bit asking too much mana and not quite doing enough, but it does give you a lot of mana back with Chapter 2, allowing your creatures to get mana for sorceries and instants, which also allows you to increase to get you to Chapter 3 a lot sooner. I'm going to say Chapter 3 apparently this entire time, trying to say level 3, but it's difficult habit to break with these sagas in my mind. But once you get to level 3, you get there a lot quicker since your creatures now tap for mana, and then you got to be doing extra damage, so very much the blue-red is it style card. It's very much on flavor for the colors. Not so sure on the deck this really goes into, but again, a card worth brewing around. Druid class, maybe a good sideboard card against an aggro deck just for literally Chapter 1. You just play it for 2 mana, and for the rest of the game, you get landfall, draw a card, and again, it's difficult to interact with. Assuming the aggressive deck is red, they're not going to have enchantment hate, and so this will just stick on the battlefield and gain you a life every turn. And sure, maybe you do level 2 and level 3 eventually. So again, looks like a marginal sideboard card for Constructed. Paladin class. Now we're cooking. The first ability, just 1 mana, and then tax your opponent on your turn, right? Making their counter spells a lot worse and things. In a white weenie aggressive deck, this thing looks awesome. And then being able to have an Anthem for 3 mana after that, which is what an Anthem should cost you anyway, that's insane. like, yeah, you do have to pay 4 mana to get your Anthem, but you can do it over different turns, and you're getting a good value for the extra mana. That first ability is really powerful to text your opponents on your turn, making their counter spells, again, just really, really bad against when they're already just under the gun because you have 20 1-drops in your deck or whatever you have, right? 12, 16 1-drops. This thing looks awesome. And then to have the ability to have some type of mana sink at the end of the game, I mean, that's kind of the problem, right, with these decks is you putter out, and the whole point is you get them dead before your opponent can get their feet on the ground. And so to have a mana sink late game for this, to say, hey, I'm just going to make my creatures nice and beefy, give them double strike and I attack, that's really, really strong to have in a card that you don't have to have that to make it playable. This card is already very playable for the first 2 levels, and then have just this bonus effect is awesome. I love the flexibility of these cards. What's cool about Monk class is I see this one as a very nice tempo card, but you can do it just on turn 3. Like, you think about this in like a Jeskai deck, and turn 3 you just play this and then you stomp a creature for 1 red. Wow, that's great. And then at any point you can just do level 2 and just boomerang a creature, right? Or a non-land permanent, so it doesn't even have to be a creature, it could be a planeswalker or an artifact or someone else's saga or whatever these the classes. This is a really, really nice flexible card. And then level 3 rolls around and you're getting a really good card engine, and you didn't have to dump a bunch of mana into this. Plus, you've been getting a mana advantage all game because of the first level of this thing. I mean, this thing pays for itself mana-wise. This looks insanely powerful. Expect to see this one in Constructed. I mean, again, these cards all look very much like you can brew around these one single cards and build decks around them, and this is just a really powerful effect that we're doing here. Saving my personal favorite for last, and I want to know in the comments below what you think your favorite one is, but for me, it's Ranger class. Because it's just on rate, again, this is built for constructed play, you can just see it. So for 2 mana, you're getting a 2/2. It's, you know what, great. That's just solid. You're getting a 2/2 for 2 mana. Grizzly Bears. When have Grizzly Bears ever been bad in Magic? Yeah, they're not great, right? But that's just the first chapter. You're just getting a decent value for your first level. Then being able to pump your creatures when they start attacking and getting bigger, that's really strong. I mean, those 1+1+1 counters, that's a lot of value. You're getting more power and toughness onto the battlefield just for attacking. That's awesome. And then level 3 for just 4 mana, you start having this enchantment that just lets them churn through cards on the top of your library. I mean, again, each chapter is very much like a little bit overcost. This reminds me, honestly, a lot of the adventure creatures, where like by themselves, they weren't necessarily the best costed cards, but putting both of them onto one card, like 2 mana, 2 damage, not great. Even if damage can't be prevented this turn. But when that stomp is attached to a really good body, that's an amazing card, right? Bone Crusher Giant is obviously an awesome card. We all know this. And that's what these classes remind me of, is that each individual part of the card is maybe a little bit expensive or not quite on rate. But when you add all of them into the same card, it's just bonkers the amount of value you get, especially the ones that turn into card value engines in Chapter 3. I mean, that's just where it's like, whoa. The late games, there's going to be some fun, grindy matchups. There's going to be some really swingy turns where all of a sudden, you top deck this thing and you level it up to level 3, and then your next turn you draw a card, and then you just runner, 3 creatures off the top of your library all in a row. That is going to be sweet. Can't wait to see it happen. These classes are going to be awesome. Hey, hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for tuning in and watching the whole thing to the end. Tune in next time for the dungeon cards.